All right, I'm here for the next episode of the Powerless Podcast with Keira Havens, who is one of the founders, right, of Citizens Impeachment. I guess I can have you introduce, which is, a bipartisan effort to first and foremost impeach, convict, and displace Donald Trump from the presidency. Which I'm a big fan of that. I think that seems like a reasonable request at this point, especially. So first and foremost, give people your official title and kind of your background here as we get started.
Absolutely. Okay, so I actually have two titles now. The first one is Executive Director of Citizens Impeachment. That's the group that's been around the longest. And we started in April of 2025. We got about 1,000 people together and said, hey, Congress, have you thought about impeaching this guy? Because at that point, we've got DOJ, we've got Elon Musk, we've got the Social Security Administration open, we've got tariffs, which are bonkers, right? All sorts of appropriations that are being usurped, and a lot of individual civil liberties being trampled on, right? Gilmer Abrego Garcia was at that point in time being held. We had all the students from Colombia, lots of things going on. It was enough for us to say, well, let's get cracking. The Constitution has a remedy for this. Let's do it. And I am now also the co-founder of Courage for Democracy PAC, because the process of talking to Congress and saying, hey, you have a responsibility here to oath of office to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Why don't you impeach? They kept telling us, wait till after the midterms. So we're like, okay, well, if you want these to be the impeachment midterms, we can do that. And we went ahead and found 100, I think we're up to 115 candidates that are pro-impeachment, pro-democracy, and all those folks live at CourageForDemocracy.com, fighting their fights and bringing courage and impeachment to the ballot. So two hats right now, all in service of making sure we actually get to the point of fixing this mess rather than just twiddling our thumbs while it keeps getting worse.
Yeah, I had noticed from another interview you had done on a different podcast a while back that you kind of talked about that change that's happened over the past. We're at almost a year in total of this all kind of this big journey of what's been going on for you and your organizations. I guess a little bit to that, starting this organization of, we need to impeach this person. Here's some of you have a great list on your website of all the different reasons of why, how, the myths, all these different things that I want to dive into a little bit. You kind of said it there a little bit, but where was kind of the point where you're not only do we want to kind of have this pressure campaign to people in office, but we're also going to challenge people? Was it kind of this fecklessness you're saying, kind of this dismissiveness, which I think, as we've seen both from probably anecdotally from just messages from leadership in the Democratic Party, as well as just I don't know, just this kind of separation of the urgency we're in. What was kind of that tipping point? Where there's specific things that were said, kind of the rhetoric that brought that to you? Just kind of speak to that a little bit, where you went to, we're not just going to pressure, we're going to primary and oust people.
Absolutely. So when I started this, I thought the petition process worked, right? First Amendment says you can petition your government for redress of grievances. I would get an email from somebody and they'd say, call them about this. And I would, and sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And I thought somewhere that there was an organized mechanism for taking this input in and turning it into actions that Congress takes. I cannot tell you how wrong I was about that. So it turns out that if you are a constituent, right, and you send an email or make a phone call and you say, I demand a response, I request a response, they will put you into a track called constituent correspondence. And that means that instead of answering your question, what you get is a PDF 4 months later with one of those keywords that you used in your email. It may or may not still be relevant. The legislation may have died. It may have passed. Who knows? Because they are getting back to you 4 months later. That is the process for constituents. So that
seems very poignant, right? Right. Yeah. They get back to you very promptly and feel the urgency of the constituent there clearly, right?
Yeah, right there. That's actually something that we tell all our candidates to do, is that you should encourage people to actually write to their reps just so that they can see exactly how long and how non-communicative they are, because a lot of people don't even do that. Some folks don't even know who their rep is, right? So if you get the thing that has been most radicalizing for everybody is coming face to face with the system and realizing exactly how little it cares. There's a separate track for constituent correspondence where they kind of pat you on the head, right? There are theoretically people tallying up your phone calls somewhere in the offices. But if you ask, how many people do I need to call to get you to take action on this item? They will not tell you, either because they don't have an explicit process or because they just don't want you to know, because then they would have to do something about it, right? So after kind of the reason we got through the first time was because we targeted specific staffers in the offices. So staffers will have specific jobs and specific target areas, and you can reach out directly to those human beings and say, look, person, I need to talk to you about this. That's how the actual lobbyists do it. And so we're sending a lot of emails, we're making phone calls, and there's still no action happening. And even more than that, leadership is coming down really hard on the people who want to take action. So we thought, well, let's meet with the representatives, right? Like, let's sit down with the people that are in Congress. And this, right? If I can't get to a human that way, I'll show up. And so we escalated to getting people face to face with their reps and their staffers. And one of the promises that we made to our members is that if you get a meeting with your rep, I'll show up. Someone from Citizens Impeachment will be there so that they can't just pat you on the head and say the rep's working real hard, so that we can ask questions about where are you in this process? Have you done any of this? Will you do any of it? And when can I follow up? Because they really don't like it when you follow up, because again, that means they got to do something.
Right.
So during those meetings and subsequently when we stepped up the lobbying days in person in districts, that was the turning point right there. I had a constituent with me who was talking about just the destruction. He was in academia, he was a scientist, just the destruction of institutions that had underpinned American science for decades, right?
Right.
And he asked, why aren't you doing more? And the staffer said, well, I sleep well at night. Or the rep sleeps well at night. And then this was in California. This was Rep Peter's staffer. Another person from Connecticut who was talking to Rosa DeLauro's staffer said that they also said the same thing.
Like the same exact messaging, like literally the same exact messaging. They
sleep well at night. And so when you talk about this disconnect, this lack of urgency, I mean, that is a literal statement about what is happening. There's not a recognition that this moment is different, that it is not the same as before. And so I just moved to Washington, actually, because if you can't tell from the story, like, all I do is escalate. We're not taking no for an answer, right? So I'm in Washington, D.C. now, and I go to the offices. I got here last week and started printing stuff out and handing it out. There is nobody in the halls. You can hear toilets flush and the elevators as you are walking through this completely empty building. Nobody is there. They're so isolated from the outside world. So my advice to anybody listening who wants to actually be heard, just show up and make, like, that alone will make them super nervous because they don't know why you're there or what you're doing there. The whole point is to keep you out.
It makes a lot of sense. I've seen with other issues outside of impeachment in the past, we've seen horrific stories, whether it was the Trump administration, like you're saying, or prior. Like, this is, I'm sure, as you've seen through your activism, as much as Donald Trump and the new administration is like the most bold iteration of these things.
Oh, yeah.
And a certain escalation and stories of people that are trying to fight for disability rights, trying to show up to their special education teachers. So that's why I follow these things a little more closely in that vein. That's why I say that is I just remember seeing, I might have been someone from like one of the Dakotas. I remember brought their child that was like losing their services, and like the congressperson couldn't be bothered to even see them. Just a staffer that may have joined for a different reason in DC years back, is now in this kind of swamp of things, just kind of ushers them out. And that's literally their constituent. So of course it makes sense when you're going to something as it shouldn't be viewed as bold. It should be viewed as pretty straightforward when you look at like the Constitution and law, but we know that these things don't necessarily have a trajectory to what representatives want to do with a whole host of other things that I'm sure we can get into with corruption. It is just jarring to see people that will travel sometimes from halfway across the country, all the way across the country to the other coast, to try to just speak to a representative about a very serious issue, including things like impeachment, which you obviously are spearheading with this organization, and just the dismissiveness of people. Republican is one thing. I'm not trying to diminish it with Republicans. I just view them by and large as kind of complicit, if not like eagerly motivated to be a part of this. But when you've got the opposition party doing these things to people, when they're trying to call out everything, like you said, from Doge to war to tariffs to affordability, whatever the case may be. It really, I think, it's got to be, as someone that started an organization that wants to put the pressure on, like you said, go through the right channels. It had to be very, very sobering to see that, not just once with a specific person that you could call out as a bad apple, so to speak, but that can be much more systemic than that, right? So
100%.
By and large, were there people incumbents, current people in Congress that did listen to you in this like earlier iterations of this, that you did feel like there was some movement there on the people that are already elected. Did you see more of what we were talking about earlier with like the dismissiveness and people saying, "Oh, we could sleep at night, it's fine," which is so detached, it's crazy. Just kind of what was your sense prior to starting your pack of people that are already in elected office, I guess?
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned the disability rights, because that's what I keep thinking about. There was, I think it was Matthew Cortland who was fighting, and a bunch of folks in wheelchairs
Mm-hmm.
that sat in the halls and got dragged off, right? And I saw it and it was terrible and didn't really know what to do about it. But after being here and realizing like how literally how large the hallways are, and how these are not like people sitting in the hallways would not be a problem. It was just to remove the inconvenience. I think about that all the time. And I guess I've personally made it my mission to become so inconvenient that they cannot afford to ignore me or laugh at me. And so they're going to have to deal with me at some point. That's really the game that I guess we're playing right now, because ignoring you is absolutely a tool. You got things to do, they got time, and they're just going to hope you go away.
Mm-hmm.
Laughing at you is another tool. Oh, you don't understand what's happening. Oh, this is just so complicated. Oh, we've got so many things to do, right? It's not that complicated. They can do this too, right? And then becoming unignorable, right? Becoming somebody that you have to deal with really means being able, in my opinion, being able to look at this with like clear eyes, right? And so, to your point about the Republicans in the office, that is such an interesting case, because we're not actually bipartisan. We're nonpartisan. And the
Right. Sorry, I should have
no,
said that
it's,
correctly. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, because the nonpartisan piece of it is just that everybody took the exact same oath, and I expect all of you to uphold it. That's it. We don't list parties on the website. We actually don't list them for candidates, I believe, because it doesn't matter, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
upholding the oath, great. We'll work with you. It's the same oath I took. I'm a veteran, so I I know that it is there. That's why I'm doing this. Why I'm showing up in your offices. I just expect you to uphold that oath. That's plain and simple, man. No politics involved. So granted, no Republicans have done that yet. We have had them ask good questions. We have had them meet with constituents, just two, but it's a start. And when it comes to starting the PAC, we really did it for the challengers, because it's super obvious that even the most progressive folks in the Democratic caucus are not participating in this. And we had a meeting with Representative Jayapal in Washington, and her constituent said all of the nice things about her, told the staffer how great Jayapal is, how progressive, how much she fights for her community, how much they love her down there. And I said, this is something I want her to lead on, because she could do it. She could rally people. She could make this happen. Nicest version of the conversation that I'd ever had. And then 3 weeks later, and to their credit, this office actually took the concern back, had a conversation, and came back with a real answer, right? Not just kind of patting us on the head or something. But they came back and they said, Sarah Paul will not do that now. She's waiting till after the midterms, when she plans to be on the Judiciary Committee. And the Judiciary Committee is where, I'm going to use the word normal times, impeachment articles go, they go to a vote, and then they get sent to the House. You don't have to do that. There's a separate rule. Impeachment is a privileged resolution, and any member can introduce it at any time. And that's what we push for. So it's a different process. But they just straight up said it after the midterms. So we said, well, all right, I guess we're in this game till the midterms, and we're going to find folks to primary everybody, because there is not a single person other than Al Green in Texas who has brought articles of impeachment to a vote. And that's what we need right now.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, I don't want to give Republicans credit at all during the Biden administration, because they were insane. But to your point, there were numerous times I would view there were some valid reasons there that people could have brought up with foreign policy and things of that nature. Somebody could argue, but the reasons they brought up impeachment, numerous people, whether it was Boebert or whoever else, was ridiculous. But they did show anybody could pretty much do it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
This is fight, right? Like what I lived through the ACA, right? They tried to repeal that thing like 500 times, at least 50, right? At least 50 times they brought it knowing it was going to fail. Mm-hmm. You can pick fights. You can put it into the national conversation and say, this is something we should be doing. In the case of the Republicans, right, that was what their base wanted. That was actually responsive government in like a messed up, twisted way. Right. They were listening to people. And that is not something the Democratic Party is able to do, at least not in its current form. We know for a fact that there will never be an admission that we made any impact whatsoever. If impeachment happens, it's not going to be because of us, at least per the Democratic Party. But what does happen is folks start using the language that we put out there, right? And we see it pop up in other statements. And then they start to go on TV to use our talking points. This is what Jeffries did in January after spending basically a full year saying this wasn't possible. He talked to CNN at the end of January, right around the time that Kristi Noem's articles of impeachment were gathering steam, and started explaining to people what Rule 9 was, why this is a question of privilege of the House, why everybody can submit this, and also explained why it wasn't virtue signaling, why it was important to actually have the fight. So that's the type of win that we see. It is long and slow and not enough. But what's really crucial here is that they are starting to have to move their narrative because we are not going away. This is not like a crazy rogue thing that one guy dreamed up. This is literal American citizens saying we want this nightmare to end, and this is how we want it to end.
Well, yeah, and this kind of goes into another question I was going to ask you a little bit. Let's dive a little bit into the specifics of pushing for impeachment, both right now and, of course, you're kind of the next step of your tactics of them primarying people is I think a lot of skeptics, whether they're progressive left wingers or activists or people more on the what I would maybe think of as like mainstream liberal side of things, whatever the case may be, that ideologically would be for impeachment.
Theoretically.
Yes, theoretically at a certain time or whatever the case may be. But as you just pointed out, and as we said in relation to what Republicans attempted to do during the Biden administration, the argument will be, well, it's not going to happen. It's going to fail in proceedings. It's not going to go through, which, as you talked about, and I believe as well, failure, but bringing things to a vote is still power and is still galvanizing. So with that in mind, kind of steelman that kind of like dissidence a little bit of like when someone says, why focus on this right now? Again, you've had things going on where you're going to challenge people for after the midterm or for the midterms. But what's the argument to that, I guess, for people that might view it as a failed endeavor in this current iteration of the government?
I love this question because this is what I get all day, every day. And this is what my socialist team is out there talking to folks about all the time. We've got kind of two camps, right? We've got like doomers who are like, give up, it's over, we're done, right? And then we've got let's call them the educators. These are people that think we're just stupid and don't know what we're talking about, right? So for the doomers who are like, why are you even bothering? I am just going to be real clear that this is about integrity at the core of it. This is a fight for integrity. The Constitution has written down when you have high crimes and misdemeanors, when you have bribery, for example, if somebody in the president's office makes $10 billion off a deal, right? When you have treason, like if the president was to order men into American cities against American people over and above the objections of the people elected and endowed with keeping those places safe and secure, right? When you have that, your responsibility is to take action and to impeach. There's no wait till the midterms in the Constitution. There's no if it's convenient. There's no if you feel like it matters. It is an obligation. And so that's one reframing that we're trying to do, right? That is a fight that we feel absolutely confident in speaking to and standing on and saying, y'all have this responsibility. Why are you ignoring it?
Right.
For the people that say they have give up, it's over. It's not. It's just simply not. They are still fighting in the courts because those still matter. They are losing everywhere. Every time somebody fights them, they lose. I think Epstein is a great example of this, right? Because that was a long and drawn out fight. But Massey and Khanna and Boebert and Mace, who I cannot believe I am congratulating here, all held their ground, dragged that transparency article out of committee and took it to a vote. And that vote was 427-1. One dude in Louisiana was like, well, I guess we can keep hiding it. But the rest of them all got on board because for all their rhetoric, they're cowards and they're going to do the thing that keeps their seat safe for them. And if we show up like we did for the Epstein files and say, absolutely not, people, get your act together, they will do what we say. It just takes a massive groundswell and it has to be explicit that if you do not take this action, you will lose your job. And that brings us, of course, to the midterm piece of it and the impeachment articles. We are making impeachment inevitable. It will happen. Y'all get to choose how it happens. It can happen with or without you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is going to happen because the articles are there. The people want them to be brought to the table, and we are going to make you vote on it over and over and over again. Between the first and the second vote, there were 2 votes on impeachment last year. The number of people willing to take up the question of impeachment doubled.
Right.
And that was with absolutely no help from the Democratic leadership. That was with active campaigning against impeachment from the Democratic leadership. They can't stop it. And so they are going to have to come along with the work that we are doing, whether they like it or not. The last piece of it, right? There's a lot of questions about, well, it won't work. And to that, I say, okay, fine, go ahead and give up, right? We will do the work. That's no problem. And there's also a group that will show up and say, oh, it's just a waste of time. But like, folks, whose time are you wasting? What are they doing when they have that time? How are they using it? Is it a good use of time? No. Let's waste every single second we possibly can with fights they don't want to have. Did you all ever play sports ever? Do you just sit there and wait? No, you full court press, man. Anyway, so I feel like there's just a complete disconnect in terms of what is the actual work we're doing. It's not a wait your turn kind of game. Like that's just not the game we're playing.
No, and to that point, with what you're talking about with wasting time and kind of like finding this lane of not just doing pressure, but again having challenging candidates, I think is that what you found? Like when you started this, obviously, and even start doing things like including challengers in a lot of districts and for Senate and everything in between, you're not solely maybe necessarily looking for anything other than, will you impeach? Yes or no? Will you call for articles of impeachment? Will you sign on to this? But as I've looked through the courage candidates that you've sponsored and that you're including in this pack and everything in between, I haven't been able to look at every single one because, as you said, there's over 100, which is fantastic. But from what I can tell, grassroots challengers, people that maybe would have never jumped into office before this iteration of the Trump administration, and it makes me kind of think about that issue of time that you're talking about and what's important, because what you're talking about there, it's pretty telling of, it's a waste of time. Well, what else are they going to be doing? They're going to be calling donors. They're going to have meetings with lobbyists that are not fighting for civil rights, but that are fighting for whatever industry, maybe an industry within their own district or whatever the case may be, that is very well connected to deep pockets within their own district. Was that something that was pretty, like, you weren't very surprised at? Was that something that was a little more telling of kind of this contradiction, not just of a single issue, but this is a lot bigger than that, right? Mm-hmm. It's there's a correlation. It's kind of like when people have talked about things like various PACs, APAC's one that people talk about a lot right now, where it's not just about, people think of it as a single issue, but it's really not a single issue. It's a litmus test, right? Mm-hmm. So were you surprised by that kind of contradiction there, or was that pretty much what you expected when you started vetting candidates that you would endorse or support?
Yeah, so you're right. It did start out as, well, these people won't do it, will you? Will you introduce our articles of impeachment? Because we have them written up. They're ready to go. One of them has been introduced to the House floor. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it cannot be done. We just have people who lack that spine, right? But as we started getting close to the 1-year mark, it became super clear that just identifying the candidates who would do this was not enough, because the machine, the structure of politics in the US is such that people don't pay attention until after the primaries, even though the primaries are the place where you get to figure out what choices you have. Right? I cannot stress enough how important that first race is. And you're absolutely correct. We have so many veterans. We have firefighters. We have former federal workers. We have physician's assistant. Ashley Bell in North Carolina just won her primary. And she won it in a race with 5 people. She took home more than 50% of that vote handily in North Carolina 10. It's a super rural district, so it's a difficult place to get to know people and to reach out to them. But she put in the work and she did it. And that's what we were asking people right up front is, are you willing to say the thing when nobody wants to hear it, right? And are you willing to fight? We didn't ask if they'd raise money or if they had endorsements or something like that, because we are here to make sure that the representatives, the people who are supposed to be representing us, have to fight for their seat every single time they are elected, because it's the complacency that is messing this whole thing up. It's the complacency that makes them think they don't have to listen to us. It's the complacency that makes them think that we are going to be complacent and give up. And it's the complacency that keeps us in this weird, like, locked up version of government, rather than having it be something, let me be cheesy here, by the people and for the people, right? Like that was the plan. It would be great to go back to the plan. What I have been just floored by and so grateful for is how incredible all of the people stepping up to fight are, because they could do other things. They have had careers. They are, were working like in jobs that they loved. This is not their primary. They didn't to do this. They didn't get anointed by the Democrats. And in a lot of cases, the parties in their, the county level parties are freezing them out. In a lot of times, we are the only endorsement they might have for a couple months there while they are building support. Because again, this concept of like freezing you out and hoping you'll go away extends top to bottom in politics, in the US at least. And so the fight that we're seeing is so remarkable. In New Hampshire, Heath Howard is a young guy. He's in his 20s. He is a state legislator, state legislator already. And he just killed a bill that was going to harm his constituencies by adding in unrelated amendments, right? He knows how to work the system, and he is willing to work it for the benefit of people that he serves. This is out in New Hampshire. On the other coast, Nico Carjuza is running against Garamendi, and Garamendi has been there for 30 plus years. He is one of the oldest people in Congress. And Nico went out to all of the Democratic, I'm going to use the wrong word here, but the groups that decide endorsements. And he said, hey man, give me a chance. Don't automatically give the endorsement to my incumbent. Let me have a shot. And he convinced enough of them to let him do that. And that's the first time that Garamendi has had not been endorsed, maybe ever. But this is where these people are understanding the system. They're figuring out where to get in there and approach the power structure. And then they're saying, excuse me, I am here and y'all need to give me a shot. And it's just been the most inspiring thing to see.
Yeah, and on that question a little bit, because I just looked up this candidate, Nicholas Carjuza, that you're talking about in California, in the 8th District of California, and some of the other ones that you mentioned. Some of the two candidates I've talked to that I found from your guys' post, because I thought it was a good vetting tool to at least see who's got integrity to talk to, because I'm not someone that I'm a person that I think I am like electorally skeptic. Like I'm not one of those doomers that you know what I mean? Like I view it as a tool. I don't view it as the end all be all. I'm sure you're the same way. A lot of people in activism, it's a multifaceted thing we need to do to push for things and a variety of issues. And the two that I've talked to, both Matt Conroy and Dylan Blaha, they're both in what I would call pretty safe Democratic districts. I believe Conroy in Illinois here, he's running against Mike Quigley, who has been in office since 2009. And prior to him, it was Rahm Emanuel, which many people know and despise, right, in the Democratic Party.
I remember Rahm,
And then Dylan Blaha, again, is running in a district that it was Republican for a long time, but then it basically got gerrymandered in favor of Democrats. And now it's very much a safe Democratic seat. And so I say all of that to say, like, have you noticed kind of a difference in these, whether it's here in Illinois, in a I don't know the specific district for Carjuza, but maybe it's a pretty safe California seat for the Democratic Party. Have you noticed like a difference between how these candidates and how this kind of uprising, so to speak, in the electoral process is handled between safe Democratic districts where really the primary is the election in a lot of cases, versus maybe like a swing district where they might be more willing or not more willing, depending, to hear an upstart candidate if it means they might beat the Republican? Have you kind of seen that a difference there a little bit? Is that something you've noticed of kind of like the tactics of how they're handling kind of upstarts, and just kind of what's been your sense as this whole thing's been getting into high gear with the primaries going on right now?
Yeah, well, I have some bad news. It's the same tactic, just used in slightly different ways, and the tactic is ignore them, right?
Yeah, yep. That's what I thought.
In safe Democratic seats, Democratic groups ignore people because they want their guy to get their turn. Tracy Hunt in Pennsylvania is an example I go to a lot, because he used to be a Republican. He had a whole career as a lawyer. He's switching gears now to join Congress because he knows his his people and his district, and he thinks this is ridiculous. Like, we are not in the place we should be. So he switched his party affiliation because he doesn't want to be associated with this MAGA mess. And he took our pledge to introduce articles of impeachment, the anti-corruption, anti-authoritarian, anti-oligarch pledge, and he's running his race. And the Democratic Party there simply refused to let him speak to people. And that is not a safe district. That is a district that requires independent voters and Republicans to win. And let me just stress, this is a crazy year because there are Republicans that are crossing the aisle to vote for Democrats because they know this is not right. Right? That is happening. Mm-hmm. So imagining that you're going to coast on that, for the next 2 years, I mean, I guess you could be that short-sighted, but what you want to actually do is build people who can govern for that entire coalition so that we can squeeze the folks trying to destroy the democracy out of power, right? And to do that, you need to actually build bigger than just get your guy in power for the next 2 years. On the other side, in these very safe seats, you get frozen out because, your guy wants his turn. There are folks in Texas. There is currently a runoff. Chelsea Hockett is facing off with Ruth Torres and that runoff is in large part because Chelsea's opponent feels entitled to a seat. Like she has a long history in the Democratic Party. Chelsea's new to the district, and right now Chelsea's just out working, right? Out talking to people, out making those connections. In Nico also in California, there's a group that might be interesting to talk about a little bit more. But Lauren Collin is an independent running in a very safe blue seat. And part of the reason that he's running alongside another independent of ours, Karen Ortiz, who's in New York, they're running as independents because they're trying to break the stranglehold of the two-party system, right? If in their calculus is that they can just get 5 seats of independence, right, all of a sudden they become the most powerful people in Congress, right? So we're seeing a ton of creativity, and you can't really do the super creative political stuff. That's probably unfair to the folks running in our leaning districts, but you can get really creative in safe blue districts for people that you have a baseline of progressive values, and the job is then to start connecting those values to action, because that's what's been missing. So we have a number of people taking creative approaches there, but yeah, the tactic really is, why are you here?
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, I think the thing that people are missing, and maybe you could speak to this a little more as someone that's been trying to push for this for well over a year now in various ways. I think what people are missing, and I could just say this tangentially from where I live, which is a relatively conservative rural area of Illinois. I know people outside of the state don't realize that exists for a vast majority of the state, but that's the case, is that people are looking for, in a singular word, integrity, right? Yeah. People have lost and impeachment can kind of be like a lightning rod for this. Yep. And that people just have felt like, my entire life, at least for the most part, forgotten about, or who cares who I'm going to vote for if nothing's going to positively affect me. And that's where vitriol campaigns come from, and people vote for somebody where they're like, if they're not going to help my life out, at least they can help me hate who I want to hate, on a legislative level. And so I think an organization like this is so palpable for people in a nonpartisan fashion, because people are looking for that word, for integrity. So I guess in response to these campaigns that have been going on for a while, and again, we can get into a little bit of specifically Illinois if you want, because I know the 17th is where this is all coming down here. As you said last week, we've seen several primaries already unfolding. A lot of them have been very, very close. There's been a lot of contention, more than I've seen in previous years when it comes to primaries.
Well, and let's pause for a second and talk a little bit about I talked about the machine of politics, and boy, Chicago has itself a crazy machine.
It's rough.
I went to school in Chicago and only there for 4 years, but even then, right, it was Mayor Daley years and stuff. There are institutions, and folks are willing to challenge them right now, which is really exciting. But also these institutions are not prepped for the fight, man. No. They are not used to being challenged, and just showing up is half the battle at least. So yeah, let's talk about Illinois.
Yeah, I think a good kind of flashpoint for this, because it's, I think, been the most visible campaign. There's been a lot of news this week about Katabu Ghazali's race, and there's been you could tell that the sort of machine doesn't know how to handle these things when you've got someone that has pretty front-facing public platform like Abu Ghazali has, where you're seeing something like just them dumping crazy amounts of money to try to do everything from smear campaigns to like promoting some of her platform specifics and trying to hit it from like a progressive angle. There was the whole thing going on from like MS Now where they broke a story on that, where that was going on with a whistleblower and all that. And what's interesting, and why I think, again, movements like yours in relation to these candidates, why they're not prepared for it, is they think that, and for a long time this has been the case, that more money equals win, right? Like in the past, there's been statistics that showed like 90% of the time the person that has the most money wins the primary or definitely wins the general election. And it seems like that's kind of going away a little bit more with these grassroots insurgents. As Katz is sort of a flashpoint, but also a lot of these other candidates that you've already been discussing, and certainly in the context of Illinois, why do you think you've seen that change, and that from someone that's been in an organization for this so vehemently over the past year? Why do you think like that change has shifted so much, even compared to previous social media, digital age primaries and elections, that now it really seems like people can run a scrappy campaign and get, at the very least, very close, when that was not the case even during the last midterms?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, I think the emergence of AIPAC as a common enemy. I mean, with the genocide in Palestine and the kind of unrepentant bulldog tactics that AIPAC has engaged in, folks have rallied around this idea that PAC money buys you bad politicians. And the Track AIPAC group has done a fantastic job of really zeroing in on the relationship between that money, not just from AIPAC, because of course, as you say, it's never just like one isolated group. There's a whole network, right? But they've done a really good job of zeroing in on that specific network and their relationship to incumbents. And we can tie that directly to abject failures of leadership over the last 2 years. There is a real straight line to make. And I think that has elevated the concept of money in politics equals bad for many, many people who maybe just didn't think about it before. Now, anything, PACs are a tool of the political system that we're in. Entirely possible to change the tools that are needed to run for office if you have people that want to change those tools, which is part of the work that we're trying to do. But right now, like, we're a PAC because we have to have a way to take money in, and every single candidate also has a PAC because they also have to have a way to take money in, since we're not publicly funding elections right now, right? But it's that straight line between disastrous political outcomes and the money that buys the politicians that has been really effective in elevating that awareness and made working with AIPAC super toxic. And other PACs having skepticism attached to them now as well, right? But I think that another piece of it is that folks, I mean, I'm 42, right? I have seen all of this before now. I have seen all of this before, and I am not willing to just sit on my hands and wait. The economy's not good enough for that. Nobody can buy a house. I know people who aren't having kids, right? Nobody can move on with their lives until we figure out how to address this abysmal system that just fails to represent any of us. So I think there is a lot more unrest, especially when you pair this with just like the obscene level of wealth that is being put in our faces all the time, with like Bezos's wedding, right? And just the billionaire walking in with Doge and messing up entire institutions, and just a complete inability of these people who are supposed to be champions of the democracy doing anything about it. So I think those two pieces have really made folks hungrier. And then of course there's technical aspects. Like, I know Kat streams on Twitch and you can reach a lot of younger people that way. There's just a lot more ways to reach people, even if they are kind of aggressively owned by all of these billionaires, and it's a terrible, horrible circular event here. But there is a hunger for something different. That's what we have seen over and over and over again with the candidates that are coming in, is like, we got to do something. I'm so glad you guys are here. Let's get this done. Right? It's an uphill fight, but that's okay. I mean, that's what we got to do. So.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And again, to get specifically into Illinois with all of that, because as we've said, by and large, especially in the Chicago area, which you have several candidates that you're supporting in that area, the machine has really disconnected, I think, the voter from the candidates for decades. You brought up
it's
daily,
full of like in the news type corruption, right? Like Blagojevich was just calling people up for that seat way back in the day. Like I mean, it's like a microscope, like a focused microcosm of this bigger picture.
For people that aren't aware, though, people that listen to the show that are somewhat politically aware from all over the country, I'll probably know this to some extent. But there was a point in time in my life, probably, and when I was in college in the 2010s, where the joke was you are more likely, if you become governor, you are more likely to go to prison for corruption than finish and get out scot-free. Because that was the case. We had a couple back-to-back or pretty close in conjunction from both political parties that got arrested for corruption. Like you said, Blagojevich, like in the United States, it's famously super difficult to get caught with like a quid pro quo. And he was literally caught saying, I will do this for you if you give me this. And like, that's what it takes. We know how hard it is to arrest people in office for corruption. And he was so blatant with it. He was put in prison, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, pardoned by Trump. But another reason for impeachment. But with all that said, what, with some of these candidates for Illinois, I know on the Senate level, we've got Kevin Ryan, we've got Brian Maxwell. As I said earlier, we've got former guest of the show, Matt Conroy, in Illinois District 5. Several others, go down the list. There's quite a few that you've supported as courage candidates in Illinois. I guess just like, with a lot, I don't know. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with a lot of candidates. I know you have a lot of people that you deal with this, but what's kind of been your sense for the candidates that you're aligned with, that you're supporting through the PAC and things of that nature, and specifically in the state of Illinois?
Yeah. So I just want to make clear like what we do for the candidates, right? We have the code of ethics that they all agree to. We have the impeachment articles that we ask them to pledge to introduce, right? Mm-hmm. We have a very basic platform, which is just pro-democracy, anti-corruption, anti-authoritarianism, and anti-oligarch. That's it. And they themselves have adopted another plank to that platform, which is that was something that they came together and decided to get behind.
Perfect.
And then we sit down with them once a week and we talk about, we help them get to know each other, share their stories, talk about tools, tips, tricks. Sometimes we bring in outside speakers, but that's it. We have just started. We've been doing this for a year on nothing. And so there's no money. That's not like we're handing cash to these candidates or anything like that. And we are not professional political strategists.
Right.
We are folks who can figure out how to solve a problem. And that has come in handy, right? But we are not your consultants. We don't have your polling, that sort of thing. What we do have, though, is a determination to start building a block that cannot be ground up by the machine once it gets into office, right? Mm-hmm. So we are fostering these relationships and connections with people so that they can take action without being told you can't do this. This is how it gets done here, right? We want to rebuild that core. The folks in Illinois keep coming in. Like there are, I think we just got someone from Illinois 7 recently, just a couple days before the election. Kevin Ryan, yeah. I think he's the very first candidate to go to all 107 state districts in Illinois for his
I've been paying attention to him. It seems like he's literally on the road nonstop, which that's difficult to do when you're a grassroots candidate, right?
Oh, 100%, right? But it's crucial because as you said, like, yeah, Chicago exists, but the rest of Illinois is way out there in the cornfields, man. Like you got to get out there and see the people. So there's that type of thing, the outreach, right, to people that you will be representing is super important to all of these candidates. Bushra just sat down with my co-founder, Sarah Fight, for a new segment that we're calling just 10 questions for right now. Not very creative. 10 questions, 5 of them about the campaign, 5 of them about who you are. Mm-hmm. And this is another piece of the puzzle. Like be an actual human, like be an actual human that can relate to other humans. And if you have and has an opinion and a stand on something, right? Like say what you mean and know where you are. I know that's something that Kat has said as well. Just she has a lot of supporters that disagree with her, but they know where she stands, and so they're willing to have that conversation. And actually, Mike Simmons, the same volunteer who lives in Illinois 9, brought all three of these people to us. Just lives close to the campaign offices and was able to knock on the door and say, "Hey, I work with this group. Do you want to join?" So there's that sort of active participation from our people as well. And that's another journey from really trying to get Jan Schakowsky to take a stand and then saying, well, I guess you're not gonna, let's bring the new folks in, we do have a ton of people. I think we're up to 13 folks running for office in 7 seats. So let me just pull up Illinois actually and see the faces so that it reminds me of who else is in there. Annabelle Mendoza, yes, is our brand new candidate. We just talked with her last week. And Reed came on a couple of weeks ago. Dylan, of course, is a veteran, and he worked with Demi who's running at the state level, who's also a veteran. They were the very first to talk about refusing to follow illegal orders.
500 members of the Texas and Illinois National Guard are on standby in Chicago, ordered to protect federal immigration enforcement agents and facilities.
I think it's a slow normalization of the use of the military in American cities.
But active duty Illinois Guardsman Captain Dylan Blaha and Staff Sergeant Demi Palachek say this is not what they signed up for, and it's an order they're willing to defy. Palachek's mother is originally from Mexico.
If you were activated to the Chicago mission, would you defy orders?
Absolutely. I would definitely say no.
Tell me why.
I mean, I'm not going to go against my community members, my family, and my culture, my neighbors.
The two are running for office as Democrats, Palachek for state representative and Blaha for Congress. Both spoke to us as civilians, but say speaking out risks consequences.
I already have been disciplined a couple times. They actually suspended my security clearance.
Serving in the National Guard can offer a pathway to citizenship. CBS News has learned nearly 2% of Illinois Air and Army National Guard are not U.S. citizens. Roughly 200 current members hold green cards.
They are in panic, because they're choosing if they stay on the right side of history and they stand up for their community, their family, their culture, or they lose everything because it'll stop the process completely.
Palachek and Blaha say they're trained for military combat, not to police city streets.
You are both members of the National Guard. You don't want to see your fellow soldiers in your city.
No.
I think a lot of Americans would be shocked to hear that.
I mean, I wish that Americans would talk to other National Guard members, because all of my soldiers do not want to be activated and are scared, and their families are in hiding.
Are you surprised more people haven't spoken out?
I am a little surprised, but after speaking out, I understand why no one wants to do it.
We were trained to stand up for what we believe in and stand up for the American people, the Constitution. It's crazy because I figured other people would speak out right now, and it's crazy to think, oh wow, it needs to be us because nobody else is.
And if you remember, that language ended up making its way into a video, right? That Congress put out about just following the rule of like the laws of war, right? And refusing those
which
illegal
is treason,
orders.
apparently, is what I've been told for some reason. Yeah.
Well, yeah, told it's sedition, but without Demi and Dylan taking that step at the very beginning, we would not be in a place where there was even a news cycle around the murder of shipwrecked people, because it takes the speaking up and the speaking out in order to be able to make that change in the public narrative. And so, yeah, that's Demi and Dylan were one of the very first candidates to show up. They were in our first batch of 10. And we had a press conference on the Hill. It was mostly North Carolina because they were primary super early, and then a couple of Illinois and stuff. And we set them up in the National Press Club, and we streamed it live, and everybody did a 3-minute clip about why Donald Trump needed to be impeached. And we kind of took off from there. So they were one of the first two people to really kickstart this idea that we could build this coalition. Illinois has been there right from the start.
Well, and I know I had heard from Dylan on Demi. I'm obviously not in that area for the state rep, but Dylan was the first candidate that I was able to speak to. And again, I think I first saw him from things that I'd seen from you all. And yeah, to that point, I mean, people talked about Mark Kelly and I think Slotkin doing their video on you don't have to follow illegal orders. There's a lot of publicity on that. They eventually get I forget the specifics, but some sort of indictment, or at least scare tactics of indictments on them for sedition and treason. Dylan had his security, at least temporarily. I haven't kept updated with it, but pulled as a member of the National Guard, right? Because he put these statements out and has not had like the press coverage to support him that maybe like big senators have. But these people still did it because, again, it goes back to that word I think that your organizations and your PAC so singularly defined, which is integrity, right? These people can say, well, I'm going to do the correct thing, the moral thing, and let the chips fall where they may. Maybe this will affect me. Maybe people in the 13th district of Illinois won't like that he said that. Maybe they will. But at the end of the day, you can't. I think the difference between organizations like yourselves and like the old guard of the Democratic Party lobbyists and organizations is you're not putting your finger in the air and trying to see which way the wind moves and going, oh, this is where people are at. It's let's make the case, the correct case, because we know we're right on what Congress should be doing. And I think people are looking for that. And I think in the past, from anyone as old as Bernie Sanders to the new when the squad came in, to all these different things of their kind of upstart rises, is people aren't looking for someone to ask them what they people are looking for a path from someone that is in office, knows what they're talking about, has conviction, and wants to make the case for a more just system and a better functioning democracy and country. And I think that's like the big difference I see a lot of the times between your organization and even some like landmark progressive ones that I do like the people that they back a lot of the time, but it's still this sort of like, where are people at? Can we have this candidate in this area? This one's kind of a swing district. Can we really put a progressive there that's going to call out the war, call out ICE, call for abolishing ICE, and call for the impeachment of not just the president, but people that are making the horrific things he's deciding to do that are unlawful and unconstitutional possible. I think that's something people are looking for more and more. They don't want to be told, oh, what you believe is right. They want to have the case made to them for a vision. And I think that's something that's been missing from the Democratic Party for my entire life. I'm in my mid-30s. For my entire life, I have only seen people doing like a beautiful mind thing with like string on a board of like, okay, what can we exactly say and what do we have to take out even though we like it, and all these different things. It's like, that's not really what politics is anymore. Maybe it never was, but now it's actually like tangible that people can run for office and get out a longtime person potentially because they've kind of changed that vision. Like, do you kind of agree with that sentiment of like the changing waves of looking at how people run?
Absolutely.
This most modern.
And let's talk a little bit. I'm glad you mentioned the other progressive groups, right? Justice Democrats endorsed 12 people total in the entire nation. That is what they've done. And they put a lot more money, right? They will ask you for money on their behalf and they will send those over, but they picked 12. And a piece of that, right, is that they are picking folks that work with the Democratic concept, right? Leaders we deserve is a little bit different. They're saying we need to get these people out of office. I think they maybe have 15 or 20, and a lot of them are state level seats, right? With 115, there is no possible way for us to define the agenda. We simply can't do it, right? But what we have done, like I said, is put all these people in conversation with one another, and we've asked them, what do you care about? And so at the very bottom of our site, you'll see a little link to a policy matrix there. And that's every single candidate that we've been able to bring the information into for now. And it's going to keep growing. I mean, we get 5-6 people a week through this. And they tell us, or we go through their website and we're like, what are your positions? And we now have a survey that everybody can do. And from those policy positions, right, emerge the things that this group can fight for. And that's, universal healthcare is right up there. Americans want universal healthcare, and so do these candidates. But it's not because I told them you should fight for universal healthcare. It's a position they already hold. So this allows them to begin conversations in ways that are much more intuitive and recognizable than, as you say, like putting your finger up in the air and saying, what will help me get elected, right? These are people who have already chosen to fight. And what's been really interesting about that is that, for example, there's Sam Lux is a Montana candidate. And basically, he's one of those candidates in what's traditionally a very red district. And the Democrats have just told him they don't expect him to win. They don't really want anything to do with his race, right? Because they think it's a waste of time and energy. But with our group, there's a very specific piece of legislation that's pertinent to his folks, and it's called MCOOL. It's an origin labeling for meat. So if you are a rancher, you want to be able to have folks in the U.S. know my meat came from Montana, as opposed to having it shipped in from China or Argentina, as we've seen in the news.
Mm-hmm.
Real specific, real focused, real narrow piece of legislation. When we had a conversation about this legislation as a group of candidates, right? 50 of those candidates said, yeah, I have read this. This sounds right to me. I will support you if we all make it into office. Because again, we're doing the pre-Congress concept. And so now Sam can go to his constituents and say, look, I'm not doing this alone. I know this is important to you. I know the previous guy just kind of lied to your face, right? So instead of picking between two liars, pick someone that's actually going to do something and has folks that can back them up. So it's not just that new kinds of people are coming into play. From my perspective, the super important thing that we're doing is saying, like, look, folks, we trust that your people and your race and your district. We are here to make sure that you have the tools you need to fight. And that's it, right? Like we have our standards, we have our code of ethics and our very basic platform there. But the rest of it is going to be built by the people doing this work. It's not going to be directed by the folks with money, which theoretically, if anybody ever gave us money, would be us.
Yeah. Well, and to that, I think that's a great model for this sort of, again, like grassroots insurgency, I would call it, within electoral politics, is that, like, of course, a national organization can't tell someone in Montana specifically what to support in their given district and why. You don't have you're not in the, you're not claiming or pretending to be from each one of these communities to know the idiosyncrasies of them, their demographics, what might be important to them. As someone that doesn't live in an area like Montana, my first thought would not be like, oh, this bill that's talking about labeling meat so people can know. It's not something that like is in the grand scheme of like national progressive discussions even, right? Like that, but for that person, that can be a galvanizing point for, again, somebody else that might be independent, might be apathetic, might be conservative, to go, this actually goes with my values because I want to see that what I'm consuming is from here, that I'm supporting an American business. That's a big deal across the board of people, as an example, right?
And this type of legislation, right? A lot of the abstraction in politics comes from sending that power up to the parties or to the people making decisions about who to support or which races are worth fighting or whatever. And we say, screw that, man. Like we think that's a mistake. There's, especially this year when we have just races being flipped upside down by 20 or 30 points, right? Like people are not having it. Everything is in play as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, you can see everything from like state elections in Texas to some incumbents and primaries, including some in Illinois, that are like really sweating that like they might get knocked out for the first time in their longstanding career of basically running unopposed in a primary. So to that point, the winds are shifting and everything in between. Thanks so much for going over all this. I want to just ask, I know I don't want to take too much more of your time here, but I do just want to I kind of ask, what one other big thing with the overarching movement of citizens impeachment is, of course, we've talked about a lot of things here, but it's at the end of the day, it's about impeaching Donald Trump and the administration. There's so many things, I think, for people to attempt that with, that it can be kind of hard to make sure to laser in and focus on what the best likely choices would be to throw in there for articles of impeachment. So for people that might be unaware or support this, but it's all over the place of what you'd want to throw in there, from illegal war to interactions with like the purse, which is supposed to be the Congress, to everything in between, corruption, ICE. What is kind of the mission? What are 1 to 2 things, 2 to 3 things that you think is most likely for people to do these articles of impeachment over following the midterms?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. There's a ton of things. There's a group in England actually that has been tracking this, and it's called TrumpActionTracker.info. I believe they are up to about 2,500 examples now. As
of now, it says 2,743. So we're getting close to 3,000 now. Yeah.
And they've got them neatly categorized, and they're in everything from just undermining democracy to aggressive violation of civil liberties, to, unchecked aggression. So that's a great place. Someone's like, well, what has he done? That's a great place to send people, right? As far as impeachment goes, I want to make one thing super clear. Impeachment is not a criminal trial. Impeachment is literally whatever Congress decides makes someone unfit for office. So, one of the jokes I have is if they decided he was too orange to be president, you could impeach for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of real serious real world examples that I believe we should be impeaching people for. One is just tyranny, right? If you take a look at how this man is treating the presidency, he's not treating it like a presidency, he's treating it like a kingship, right? So we have the violation of our own individual civil liberties, to include violation of First Amendment rights. We see these at Bradview, and sometimes deliberately using force to suppress that freedom of speech. There are Fourth Amendment rights where ICE is just kicking in doors. That's written down on a piece of paper. The due process is out the window in a lot of cases, also in connection with ICE and deportation. They're trying to get rid of birthright citizenship. All these things that are enshrined in the Constitution being violated. Under tyranny, there's also the usurpation of congressional powers. The two big ones right now, of course, are the power of the purse and the war powers resolution. We're seeing that right now with Iran again. They did try to impeach Trump for striking Iran back in 2025, and that vote failed. And then Representative Thanadar from Michigan 13 introduced articles of impeachment against Hegseth for the strike on Venezuela. And that failed. And he didn't even bring that one to a vote. He didn't bother with that. And now here we are again, not just with strikes, but now we have boots heading over there. And so inaction on these really does make a difference and embolden the administration. But the third piece of the tyranny article is the unchecked aggression, right? Not just the active, hot wars or special combat engagements, or whatever you're calling them, but the threats to Greenland, the threats to Cuba, the threats to Mexico, right? We are engaging in aggression to the outside world, and this falls under the label of tyranny for us. And so that's one of the articles that we're asking our candidates to introduce when they get into office. The second one, which just absolutely breaks my heart as somebody who served the country, is treason. And treason is man, when you look at the clause for treason, which is written in the Constitution, is one of the reasons you impeach, right? Treason we think about it as like spies, aid and comfort to the enemy, that kind of thing. But it is about levying war against the United States. And I honestly don't know what else to call it when you are deploying federal forces accountable only to the federal government into communities and states and cities that do not want them there, especially if you're using that to suppress First Amendment rights, right? We've had this with the Marines in LA. We've had it with ICE and CBP in Minnesota. This is a tool that the federal government is using to violate state sovereignty and to tear apart the fabric of the nation. There's no other way to say it. That's treason. And so we're asking folks to introduce that as well. The third one that is written right now is what I think would be a home run for literally any representative to do. And that's just obstruction of justice for the Epstein files. Man, you had unanimous release of these Epstein files, and you got Pam Bondi out here just shuffling papers around, looking confused and lying to you. Where is your dignity? Where is your integrity? Why don't you want to hold these people accountable? Anyway, that's another one. That one I based on the Watergate articles. Those were never put forth for Nixon, but they sure map directly onto this moment where this Department of Justice and Trump are substituting their own judgment for Congress's and refusing to show documents. They're almost word for word exactly the same there. And then the fourth one, which we have been working on for a while, but just keeps growing, is corruption, which would fall kind of under bribery, right? And that it just doesn't stop. So we're just going to have to pick a spot and say, this is what we got for now. We'll add more later. Because we've been working on that for months. But yeah, those are the four big categories. Because you're right, it just keeps going. But you don't need to name every single individual thing. Mm-hmm. You just need to say, this person is unfit to hold this office, and here's why. So that's why we grouped it into the categories that we did.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the corruption one I feel like is impossible to finish because
we're just going to put an asterisk. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll be updated daily because, I know this has been said a million times over, but the fact that we've gone from a former president in Carter having to give up a peanut farm to then now we've got somebody literally opening up a private bank account in Qatar and then just throwing hundreds of millions of dollars in it, or and doing things about taking gifts and not going to give them to the state, which it's given to the state, and just hang on to. It goes over and making money off of speculative markets. Crypto scheme. I mean, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to sit here till I'll waste our time for hours going over this. But No, that makes a lot of sense. I like that you're able to break that down. Obviously, you're well aware, kind of an expert on these things at this point. So, of course, being able to rail those off for people is a great thing for them to kind of see the pragmatism of this, given the change of who will be in office to then effectively bring articles of impeachment into play. Again, Keira, thanks so much for going over all of this. I really appreciate your time. Last thing I want you to do before we hang things up here is just how people can support the organization, find a way to support the candidates, and where to find Citizens Impeachment.
Absolutely. Thanks for that opportunity. Yeah, for you guys, the most important thing you can do is support the primary challenger in your district right now. That is far and beyond the most impact that your money will have. Go to couragefordemocracy.com, scroll down past Pancake, who is our mascot, a three-legged blind dog that's going to fight you anyhow, right? Democracy doesn't defend itself. That's who we're rallying behind. And then pick your state. Find your candidates. If you don't have somebody in your district, pick someone nearby that you're going to be able to talk to and then support them. Every single candidate page has a link directly to the candidate's own donation page there to support the impeachment movement more generally. Pick the donate link on Courage for Democracy. That's how we fund all of this work. We are in the very early stages of this fundraising. We have already accomplished a lot, and we're not going anywhere till it's done. So we welcome and we value your support on that front. And then to pressure your representatives to get to a human in these offices, sign up at citizensimpeachment.com. We have trainings now to help you lobby your representative in person in your district. And every Monday, we send out actions that you can take to force the issue of impeachment. So would love to have you guys join us. And thank you so much for this opportunity, Brandon.
Yes, of course. And all of that will be in the notes below for anyone on the recorded end of things to check out. Make sure, and I'll be sharing this around with people in various group chats and things of that nature to make sure to support this. Specifically in Illinois, I know at March 17th is it for a lot of these candidates to
Absolutely.
be trying to be the upstart primary challengers. So we're definitely going to get this out as soon as I can to make sure we can kind of promote that here. But I know some of these primaries are going all the way into August and further out. So with all that, again, Keira Havens of Citizens Impeachment and Courage for Democracy, thanks so much for your time. And I all the best on all the rest of the things going on in this crazy primary process up until the midterms.
Absolutely. Come check in with us in a month or two, and we'll have a whole list of people going through to the general, and then it will get really fun.
Oh yeah, it'll be a good time. All right, thanks so much, Keira. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care.